You say you want freedom, but every time it comes close, you hesitate. Not because you don't deserve it, but because something in you quietly recoils. There is a strange moment you've felt before. You stand at the edge of possibility, a decision, a change, a life that could be yours. And instead of relief, instead of excitement, you feel a tightening in your chest, a subtle dread, as if something irreversible is about to happen. And you step back. You call it caution. You call it thinking things through. You tell yourself it's wisdom. But somewhere deeper, beneath the explanations you rehearse so well, there is something far less noble. You are afraid of being free. Not in the obvious way, not in the way people talk about oppression or limitation. You are afraid of the absence of those things, of the moment when no one is left to blame, no system, no past, no circumstance, just you, and what you will do with it. Dostoevsky understood this, not as an abstract idea, but as a lived torment. He stood before a firing squad once, blindfolded, waiting to die, seconds away from non-existence, and then nothing. A pardon. Life returned to him in an instant, and yet what followed was not peace. It was something heavier. Because when you are given your life back, completely, undeniably, you can no longer pretend it was taken from you. That is the burden of freedom. You think you want it because you imagine it as relief, as the removal of pressure, as the end of constraints. But real freedom does not remove pressure. It creates it. It places the full weight of your life directly in your hands and asks a question you cannot escape. Now what? And that question is not liberating. It is terrifying. In The Brothers Karamazov, there is a quiet, unsettling idea that echoes beneath everything. That humans do not truly want freedom. That we will trade it again and again for comfort, for certainty, for someone or something to tell us what to do. Not because we are weak, but because freedom demands something we are not ready to give. Responsibility. Not the surface kind, not deadlines or obligations, but responsibility for your thoughts, your choices, your failures, your emptiness, your contradictions. Because if you are truly free, then everything becomes your fault. And something in you resists that with all its strength. You've seen it in small moments. You stay in a relationship that no longer feels alive. You know it. You feel it every time the silence lingers a little too long. Every time the conversation feels rehearsed. And yet you stay. Because leaving would mean stepping into the unknown, into a space where no one defines you anymore. No shared history to hide behind, no structure to contain you. You would have to decide who you are, alone. And so you stay, not because you are trapped, but because you are free to leave. And that is worse. There is a quiet lie you repeat to yourself. I don't have a choice. It comforts you. It gives you a shape to fit into, a script to follow. Because if you don't have a choice, then you don't have to confront the deeper question. Why am I choosing this? Dostoevsky saw this contradiction with painful clarity. He saw that people will deliberately act against their own interests just to prove they are not controlled by logic or expectation. Not because it benefits them, but because it affirms something darker. I can destroy myself, and no one can stop me. There is a twisted kind of freedom in that, and you know it. You've felt it in moments you rarely admit out loud. When you sabotage something good, when you withdraw from someone who cares about you, when you choose the easier, smaller version of your life, even when you see something bigger waiting. It doesn't feel like weakness. It feels like control. Because choosing your own suffering is still choosing. And that, in a strange way, feels safer than choosing uncertainty. Freedom is not just the ability to act.
It is the absence of excuses. And excuses are comforting. They protect you from yourself. They allow you to say, "This is how things are," instead of asking, "Why am I allowing this?" You tell yourself you're waiting for the right time, the right conditions, the right version of yourself. But what you are really waiting for is certainty. And certainty is the one thing freedom cannot give you. Because freedom means stepping forward without guarantees. It means acting without knowing. It means choosing without being sure. And that feels like falling. So instead, you construct a life that feels structured, predictable, contained. You build routines, habits, patterns. You tell yourself this is stability. But look closer. Is it stability, or is it avoidance? Because within those patterns, something begins to fade, your sense of aliveness. You wake up, you move through the day, you complete tasks, you fill time. And somewhere, quietly, almost imperceptibly, a question begins to form. Is this it? And that question is dangerous, because it threatens the illusion you've built. It whispers that you could do something else, that you could change, that you are not as fixed as you pretend to be. And suddenly, the walls that once protected you begin to feel like a cage. But here's the deeper contradiction. You built that cage yourself, not consciously, not deliberately, but piece by piece, choice by choice, avoidance by avoidance. Because it was easier than facing the alternative. Freedom. There is a peculiar moment that happens when you realize this. A moment of clarity that feels almost violent. When you see that the life you are living is not something that happened to you. It is something you are continuously choosing, even when you say you're not, especially when you say you're not. And that realization doesn't feel empowering. It feels unbearable. Because if you are choosing this, then you can no longer blame anything outside yourself. Not your past, Not your circumstances, not other people. Just you. And that kind of responsibility is heavy. Too heavy, sometimes. So you retreat. You distract yourself. You scroll. You fill your mind with noise. You keep moving, keep consuming, keep avoiding that quiet space where the question waits. What are you doing with your life? Because in that silence, there is no escape. Dostoevsky believed that humans are not driven purely by the pursuit of happiness, that beneath our desires for comfort and pleasure, there is something more complicated, a need for meaning. And meaning is not simple. It is not comfortable. It often demands struggle, sacrifice, even suffering. And here is where freedom becomes even more terrifying. Because if you are free, then you must choose your own meaning. No one hands it to you. No structure guarantees it. No system ensures it. You must decide what matters. And once you decide, you must live with it. There is no greater burden than that, to choose what your life is for. Because what if you choose wrong? What if you commit to something and realize it was never what you wanted? What if you dedicate years to a path that leads nowhere? What if you give your time, your energy, your identity, and it doesn't fulfill you? Freedom offers no protection against regret. In fact, it makes regret sharper.
Because every path you didn't take becomes your responsibility. And so you hesitate. You keep your options open. You delay decisions. You tell yourself you are exploring, considering, waiting. But what you are really doing is avoiding commitment. Because commitment closes doors. And closed doors remind you of what you could have chosen, but didn't. So you stay in between, not fully choosing, not fully living. Safe, but empty. There is a quiet tragedy in this, because the more you avoid choosing, the more your life is shaped by default, by inertia, by habit, by the absence of decision.
And one day, you wake up and realize that time has moved forward without you. Not because you were forced, but because you were free, and you did nothing with it. That is the darkest side of freedom. Not that it traps you, but that it leaves you alone with your own inaction. You've felt it in subtle ways. When you say you want to change, but don't. When you imagine a different life, but don't move toward it. When you feel a quiet dissatisfaction, but ignore it. These are not accidents. They are choices, even if they don't feel like it. Especially if they don't feel like it. Dostoevsky's characters often stand at this exact point, not as heroes or villains, but as mirrors. They see the truth, they feel it, and instead of acting on it, they retreat into contradiction. They justify, they rationalize, they delay. Not because they are incapable, but because they are free. And freedom exposes something we would rather not see. That we are not as rational as we believe. That we will choose what hurts us. That we will reject what could save us. That we will destroy what we love simply because we can. There is a line you cross at some point, a realization that feels almost forbidden. You begin to understand that you are not simply trying to avoid pain. You are participating in it, actively, subtly. You overthink until you exhaust yourself. You replay conversations that no longer matter. You imagine outcomes that haven't happened. You hesitate when you should act. You act when you should wait. And afterward, you tell yourself it just happened. But it didn't. You chose it. Not consciously, perhaps, but willingly in a deeper sense. Because chaos is familiar, and familiarity feels safer than freedom, even if it hurts, especially if it hurts. There is something comforting about suffering you understand. It has a structure, a pattern, a rhythm. You know how it unfolds. You know what to expect. Freedom has none of that. It is open, undefined, unpredictable, and that openness feels like danger, because within it, you cannot hide. You cannot say, "This is just how things are." You must say, "This is what I am choosing." And that sentence is difficult to speak honestly. So instead you soften it, you distort it, you avoid it. You say, "I have to." You say, "I can't." You say, "It's complicated." But beneath all of it, there is a simpler truth. You are choosing, and you don't want to admit it. Because admitting it would mean confronting the possibility that your life could be different. Right now, not in the future, not when things align, not when you become someone else. Now. And that possibility is not comforting. It is overwhelming.
because it removes the distance between you and your potential. It shows you that the barrier is not external, it is internal, and that is harder to face. There is no dramatic moment when this becomes clear, no sudden revelation that changes everything. It happens quietly, in moments when you pause, when the noise fades, when you catch yourself in between distractions, and you feel it, a tension, a question, a possibility. And you have a choice, to move toward it or to turn away. Most of the time you turn away, not because you don't care, but because you do, too much. Because if you step toward it, you risk failure, you risk discomfort, you risk becoming someone you don't recognize. And staying where you are feels safer, even if it slowly erodes you, even if it leaves you wondering what could have been, even if it keeps you in a life that doesn't fully belong to you. That is the quiet horror of freedom. It doesn't force you to act. It allows you not to. And in that allowance, you can lose yourself completely. Not in a dramatic collapse, but in a slow, subtle drift, day by day, choice by choice, avoidance by avoidance, until the question no longer feels urgent, until the tension fades, until you stop asking. And when that happens, you are no longer afraid of freedom
because you have given it up, willingly, silently, completely. And yet, something remains, a faint awareness, a quiet discomfort, a sense that something is missing. Not dramatically, not overwhelmingly, but persistently, like a thought you can't quite form, like a feeling you can't fully name. It stays with you, in the background, waiting. Because freedom does not disappear. It waits. It waits in every moment where you could choose differently, in every hesitation, in every realization, in every quiet thought that asks, is this really what I want? And each time you hear it, you face the same tension, the same fear, the same possibility. You can ignore it, or you can follow it, but you cannot escape it, because it is not something outside you. It is you. And that is the final contradiction. You are not afraid of freedom as an idea. You are afraid of yourself within it, of what you might do, of what you might become, of what you might have to face. Because once you accept that you are free, you lose the comfort of limitation. You lose the safety of excuses. You lose the illusion that your life is happening to you. And you gain something far more unsettling, the realization that it is happening through you, right now, in every moment, whether you acknowledge it or not. And so the question returns, not as a philosophical thought, not as an abstract idea, but as something immediate, personal, unavoidable. If you are free, why are you still living like you're not?